Hello everyone, it's Elizabeth from the Smart Stitcher. In this week's video we're going to show you what you can do with your parabolic curve by creating a cross, a square and then a few ideas to sort of take your projects a little bit further. So let's get into it.
And once you are happy with this particular shape, you can then start to play about with it. And here I've got my vertical and horizontal axis. I've kept my stitches at 0.5 centimetre apart. And again, I'm not going to be pricking the centre one, but I am going to be pricking everything that is on the lines of my horizontal and vertical axis. Now I particularly find it helpful just to sort of flip the paper over. I know that there are some who just prefer to sort of always work from the same side. What you don't want to do is try and sort of explore where you want your needle to go and then realise that you have actually just perforated a lot of holes on the underside of your paper. So whatever technique you choose, you want to make sure that you're not actually sort of damaging your paper and that your needle is always going to go through where you want it to be going through. You don't necessarily have to keep your cork block underneath. I just haven't moved mine off, but it certainly will be happy to stay there whilst we create our curve. So I'm using exactly the same method as I've done before, and I'm just working my way along. Now sometimes you might find that your thread may not, and that's just one of the things with sort of sewing with thread. It's just worth taking the time just to sort of almost slide the needle out of the way and then just unfurl the thread, sort of remove any unnecessary twist, because you don't want that sort of starting to sort of twist up on your work either. You want to make sure that everything lies nice and flat. So we're approaching our last stitch, and I'm going to do exactly what I did the first time round. Take my thread through that hole and turn over and finish my tape with my tape on the back. So now we've got our sort of stitching pattern established. What you will find now is that you are going to be going through these sort of the same holes when you sort of fill out those different quarters. So don't worry about punching new ones. Where you've got those existing holes, they're going to be common to the parabolas either side of them as well. So you'll use those holes for your next one. So I'm going to pick a different colour just to show you what that looks like. So I've just taken my green through, that's the next colour I'm going to use. Starting in exactly the same way, I'm taping, and then I'm just going to carry on with my stitch pattern. You can of course start down here if you wish. It's finding a way that is nice and sort of systematic for you to follow, and you sort of get into a rhythm with it, and that means then that your sort of underlaps and overlaps of thread are consistent throughout your design work. Sometimes you might find that if you come up in the wrong hole, don't panic. It just will mean that you just take your needle off and you just pull the thread out, and then away you go to correct the stitch and resolve that particular issue. Sometimes I find that the tail of thread, so where the tail of the thread is sat in relation to the thread that I'm sewing on, sometimes this can flip around and almost start to knot itself together. So just keep an eye on that and make sure that it's not flipping around, because what you don't want it to do is to knot and you inadvertently end up with a sort of cannonball coming through the hole rather than just your thread that you're stitching with. As your thread starts to get shorter, just remember to slide the tail out and along so that you don't end up sewing with two threads. Right, our green is now going to be finished in exactly the same way. And I'm going to move on to my next colour, and I'm just going to repeat that sort of technique and that process with my remaining 2 colours. But you can start to see how that shape is building up. So colour number 3 is complete, and I'm just about to start colour number 4 to finish off this particular pattern. And here we have our completed set of 4 curves coming nicely together. Now you can imagine if you had a sort of another block coming, you'd have a nice sort of oval shape in there, which I'm just about to show you in a moment. You can have sort of some of these sort of offset, you can sort of have them on an angle, and each of them will sort of create a very sort of different effect. So experiment, play about, and I'm just about to show you something else that you can also do with this type of curve as well, just as it is. Still keeping the sort of same kind of format with our parabola and our parabolic curve, I'm now going to sort of almost sort of switch the curves around and have them sort of facing the inside. I'm going to put 2 parabolas in this particular square, and in this one I'm going to play about with 4 of them. Now I haven't pricked the corners again. You can do if you wish to sort of have that sort of create that effect. I sort of quite like it without, but again, you know, play about with it and experiment. The way in which I'm going to stitch the curve is exactly the same as what I did when I very first started with this one over here. So I'm following that same technique, and I'm going to start up with my upper hole up here and sort of work my way around. So I've just completed the first of my squares, and I'm just doing 2 colours on this one. I haven't started in the corner, but that's something I'm actually going to do on the next square to sort of show you the sort of difference in how that looks. So here we have our sort of parabolic curves kind of facing each other this time, and we've got some really kind of nice shapes there. But on the next one, what I'm going to do is actually pierce out the corners, and so we're going to sort of start to bring things a little bit closer together, and this time I'm actually going to use 4 colours. So let's see how that starts to look. If you realise that you are going to run out of threads, and I've certainly brought my thread back through to the front, but I realise that there isn't quite enough for me to make a stitch and to take my thread through to the back of my piece. So I'm going to slide my needle off, I'm going to pull my thread back through, I'm going to grab a little bit more of the thread that I was using, and I don't want to sort of go too short on it because I've still got to sort of get it through the holes and have a little bit of an excess to start and finish the thread. But what I'm going to do is just start my new thread as I would if I was carrying on stitching. I'm going to leave a tail, and I will just tape both of those down. What I tend to do is the one that I'm finishing off, I'll just sort of keep under a nice kind of even tension, and then I can just tape those 2 threads down together. If you've got a thread that's a bit springy, you might want to sort of tape and finish it off before you start to add the new one, and then I can just carry on within my stitching pattern. So I've finished my first corner, and I have got my first sort of colour in and done. Now what we're going to find that we can do is start to sort of overlap our threads a little bit more, and you can almost sort of start to decide, do I want to do this side and this side, and then I can overlap the next 2 colours over the top, or am I going to sort of overlap as I go? And I'm going to try and overlap as I go. The way in which I'm stitching is going to be the same, and I'll be using the sort of some of the same holes with the new thread, but we'll start to kind of overlap and sort of create a nice kind of overlapped effect as we start to sew. So I'm going to make sure that I get my next colour in the needle, and I'm going to start in exactly the same way as I've been doing. Because I'm going to bring my next colour over this way, I'm going to start down in this bottom corner, take my needle through as we've done, secure my thread as we've done. If I run out of thread, that's easy to change, and then I'm going to keep sewing in the pattern that we have been doing. And it's just worth, even though you've got another colour already there, you're still following that same kind of sewing pattern. So we've got that thread that overlaps, and it's almost like we're ignoring the green one underneath really, because we want to sort of focus on getting our next colour in. So I'm going to sort of keep sewing along and gradually working my way around to my next corner. So I'm just keeping exactly the same pattern regardless of what's underneath, and I'm gonna show you how it looks towards the end. So our pink is now all finished, and I'm going to add my third colour. My third colour will be starting here and working all the way down to here. So we have colour number 3 now complete, and I am just about to start colour number 4 up here, and I'm going to be working my way around to the very first corner where I started. Again, continuing that same technique. So here we have our finished square where we've started at the corners, and it just gives us perhaps a different sense of how sort of joined up that can look when you sort of have those points together. It creates a really nice curve. Now, some of you might say, yeah, but I really like that kind of overlapping and underlapping effect, but what about this one sort of here where we've got the green? That's actually overlapped by 2 colours, and perhaps we can sort of get it so that it isn't. And I'm going to show you that now. So if you really like that kind of half and half, then I'm going to just sort of show you how to create that bit now, and you'll be surprised at how easy it is. So we're ready to go on this last pattern. Last time when we were adding the purple colour in the previous example, we were going over the stitches. This time when it comes to doing the green, we're going to go under. So I'm going to use the eye of the needle because that isn't going to split any of my sewing threads. And I'm aiming for this hole, but I'm coming slightly to the right of the hole, tucking my thread under, and then I'm going down into that first hole. So we're following that same stitch pattern, we're just adapting our technique. So I'm now going to come up into that, and I've actually managed to come out under my thread. So I'm going to repeat that same thing again. Let me show you. When it's a little bit narrower, those first couple of holes, it's easier to angle your needle, but not as easy when you get a little bit further along. So I'm then going to slide under, and I'll use the eye of my needle. So I'm just to the right of the hole, and then I'm going to go down into that hole, coming up again where we've done before. This time it's a little bit easier to see because there's some more thread to go under. So I'm going under using the eye of the needle, and I will go down into that hole, and you can start to see the curve is building up in exactly the same way. And if I'm not careful and don't have enough tension on my thread, then I will catch my thread, which I don't want to do. So again, going under the existing stitches just to the right of that particular hole, and then I'm going down into that hole. Now I'm just going to repeat that all the way along. So I'm ready to just now finish my final stitch. So I'm going to be going up and under the light green threads, making sure I don't catch anything else, and I'm right under all of the threads. There we go. And then I'm just going to bring my last stitch down now on that right hand side, and you can see we've got a really kind of nice overlapping effect now amongst all of our stitches. So that is a great one to have a go with, and again you can sort of build it up, you can angle your blocks and just sort of really play about with it and experiment. You may even wish to experiment using different thicknesses of thread, because that again will create a different effect as well. So far we've kept the basic structure for our parabola at a right angle, but you can actually sort of take this a little bit further and change the angle on your parabola to create different effects. And that does still work. You get slightly different effects depending on the angle that you choose, but this is something that if you start to group your parabolas in a slightly different way, might be worth thinking about. So here I've just got parabolas that have been grouped with a 45-degree angle, and as you can see we've created a really interesting zigzag shape. On the star here we've got a circle that's been broken up into 8 different points, and then again we've got our parabolas that have been grouped, and as you can see, they create a really interesting effect. With certain types of stars, you can of course combine the effects, and this is one I'm sort of currently experimenting with and working on. And we've got our points, we've got our parabolas, but we've got a combination of angles. So we've got a slightly sort of smaller angle for our pink ones, and we've got a wider angle for our purple ones. And as you can see there, the effect that they create is a really interesting shape. So go ahead, experiment, play about with your parabolas, play about with placement, potentially use a pricking to help you sort of get things in the right place, and just have some fun.